We might get to see the Austral Plane in Baldur's Gate 3, and the Austral Plane is of interest to players of Baldur's Gate 3 for two main reasons I can think of, based on the information we currently have access to. Number one, because the Githyanki play a large role in the game and make their home on the plane, and two, because Gale mentions the Austral Plane in the context of his condition. Given this, and the possibility of maybe even getting to explore this plane, I thought it would be of interest to explain the nature of the place, and how it might specifically be relevant to Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I've spoken briefly about the Austral Plane in the context of the Githyanki, and I'll link the video in the description. But there's more to the Austral Plane than just the Githyanki, even if the Githyanki provide an anchor point from the perspective of the game, for getting involved in the Austral Plane in the first place. The biggest, most obvious question is, what is the Austral Plane? The Austral Plane, in a nutshell, is an endless, somewhat empty silvery sea of ether that exists as a gateway to other planes. Above all, the outer planes, places such as the Abyss, the Nine Hells, and the Seven Heavens, and the Prime Material Plane. And on its face, it probably doesn't sound all that interesting, I admit. Although speaking of a center in terms of planar cosmology doesn't really make much sense, from a material plane perspective, the Austral Plane can very much be seen as just that, a springboard to the outer planes. Geographically, the Austral Plane is empty, save for creatures and content that have arrived from other planes, races such as the Githyanki, who have planted themselves on the plane and decided to settle on it, matter such as floating rocks and material from elsewhere, and dead gods. Although time doesn't stand still in the Austral Plane, it flows somewhat differently than on other planes, in the sense that the effects of time are slowed down to a virtual halt. Centuries could pass on the Austral Plane, and it would only feel like a few hours had passed to those experiencing it. For this reason, neither aging nor hunger are concerns on the Austral Plane, which is why Githyanki reproduce on the Prime Material Plane, so that young Githyanki can grow to maturity before actually living on the Austral Plane. And this is why Lizelle has never been to the Austral Plane herself, which of course adds to her inflated view of the Githyanki and the glories of her queen Vlakith. In order to enter the Austral Plane, the traveler has two options. One can physically enter the plane, which is only possible through the use of portals, or powerful spells such as Plane Shift, and portals do exist, but they aren't exactly common. Or, one can, after a manner, project oneself onto the Austral Plane. This is usually accomplished by use of a spell or psionic ability called Austral Projection. In the first instance, a traveler completely leaves behind the plane he was on, but in the case of projection, his physical form remains on the plane of origin. This form of austral travel is technically safer than physically traveling to the Austral Plane because you are largely protected from most forms of harm. I say most forms of harm because given the right tools and circumstances, Austral Projection is still risky. Your australly projected form is accompanied by what is called a silver cord, which links your austral form to your body on the plane you reside in. Generally speaking, a silver cord is immune to damage, with a few exceptions. Unpredictable psychic winds, which occur on the Austral Plane, are a real danger to the silver cord, and can rip and tear it apart. Powerful Githyanki silver swords possess the unique ability to sever a silver cord on the Austral Plane, which makes the Githyanki all the more dangerous on their adopted home plane. And of course, divine intervention can also sever a silver cord. If the projection is destroyed, but the silver cord is left intact, then the traveler's austral body returns to the body on its plane of residence. But the risk involved in severing a silver cord means that if severed, regardless of where the body of the austral traveler is, that traveler is slain permanently in both soul and body. And when traveling through the Austral Plane, one will note that portals to the outer planes are marked by different colors associated with the plane in question, and a portal to the traveler's original plane is marked by a silvery pool. The Austral Plane doesn't truly have any native inhabitants. Rather, it's populated by an odd assortment of interlopers from other planes who've decided to make the Austral Plane their home. The most well-known of these are, of course, the Githyanki, who chose to make their home there many millennia ago. Why they decided to settle on this plane is not entirely known, though speculation suggests that the difference in time flow may have played a role in making this decision. The Githyanki are ruled by Vlakith, the Lich Queen, and are based in the city of Tunareth, but they maintain fortresses throughout the Austral Plane, and they regularly patrol the plane as well, making them a menace for virtually all travelers, since they rarely, if ever, have an ask questions first approach to dealing with other races. And the fact that Githyanki knights possess silver swords capable of severing silver cords makes them doubly dangerous. Various fiends and celestials scour the Austral Plane in search of portals and potential artifacts that may have been lost, and there are strange creatures that originally came from elsewhere, but have been on the Austral Plane for so long that they are effectively native, of which the worst and most feared is the dreaded Austral Dreadnought, no pun intended, which is thought to have been created by some dark god long ago to guard the secrets of the gods, but these days only serves the purpose of sating its enormous hunger by devouring Austral travelers, more specifically by consuming their projections. And some of the least active but most noticeable inhabitants of the Austral Plane are the corpses of dead gods. In fact, the Austral Plane is sometimes referred to as the graveyard of the gods. Contrary to what some may believe, gods are not actually immortal and can die under specific circumstances, the most common of which is death by atrophy, or in other words, death by lack of worship. If a deity does not receive sufficient worship over an extended period of time, usually many centuries, it will eventually wither and die, and its body will be expelled from its outer planar realm onto the Austral Plane. The capital city of the Githyanki, for example, was built upon the corpse of some long-dead god. So the importance of the Austral Plane is not necessarily because of all the things happening there, as there are far busier places in the universe, but rather because of its place in cosmology as a kind of nexus from which many can travel. Its relevance to Baldur's Gate 3's players is difficult to determine, but if you get close to Gale, he has the following to say.
The orb was kept safe and inert in a pocket of Astral Plane, suspended in time. If I can somehow manage to expel it from my body while in the Astral Plane, it will be rendered inert again. Alternatively, I could learn to control its chaotic magic.
This, of course, hints at the very distinct possibility that we will at least briefly travel to the Austral Plane, but the even greater possibility is, of course, related to the Githyanki. They live on the plane, and there are even files that suggest we might meet Vlakith, meaning that we would likely journey to the Austral Plane to achieve this. Speculation, of course, but hopeful speculation nonetheless. What other planes do you think are likely or would like to see in Baldur's Gate 3? As always, thank you for tuning in. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe as it really helps out the channel, and I will check you out later. Take care.